You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Damian here with my co-host, Matt, coming to you on March 15th of 2022. We have some exciting, or this is going to be an exciting episode, at least because baseball is back. The lockout is over. Spring training has started. And we are going to have a full season. But before we get into all of that, sorry for missing last week. I think both of us were just frustrated with how everything was going with baseball and just needed to take a week off of it. But shortly after, lockout ended. So how are you doing, Matt? You ready for this to all get started?
Yeah, last week we got to Tuesday and it sounded like the sides were kind of talking, and that something could end up getting done. So we kind of decided to hold off on our episode, and then it didn't get done, and we were frustrated. And then the next day it did get done. So here we are. We've had a ton of movement already. It's a little slow to start the weekend, understandably, because there's new rules and there's new obviously players and teams weren't allowed to talk for several months. But now we're starting to really get some moves going and some big time stuff happening over the last couple days. So we'll get into that, and it'll be I'm excited. It's been really fun the last couple days, and some bittersweet things. A little bit of a spoiler there, but for me, but yeah, we'll get into it here.
Yeah. So the lockout was officially lifted on Thursday. I believe it was at 4 p.m. Pacific, could be 5 p.m. Pacific. But in total, it ended up lasting 99 days. But the good news is that the sides were able to get back to it. They agreed. We are going to have a full 162 game season. So it's going to start. Opening day will be April 7th. And then April 8th for some teams. There will have to be some double headers and like makeup days in there. But we are going to get a full season, which was, I think, a real worry for a lot of people for a long time that we weren't going to get that. But, just kind of looking at the broader, perspective of the agreement, there's been a lot of talks of how far away they were on each of the numbers. And basically where they were able to settle on was the pre-arb bonus pool. They were able to settle at $50 million. The minimum salary, they got to 700. It will rise to 780 over the time. The luxury tax, which was a big issue for both sides, they got that to 230 to start with, going up to 244 by the end of the agreement. The draft lottery will be at 6 picks. There will be the universal DH, and then some other minor changes that will hit basically as they come along. But what are your initial thoughts on all the numbers and just kind of the feeling behind the agreement and what's got out so far from it?
Well, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the numbers, they kind of came to a middle point. I mean, we had talked about the players wanted the 100 million, and the owners wanted the 10 million for that bonus pool. They ended up at 50. I mean, the luxury tax, they ended up about right in the middle. That salary, I think it ended up being a little closer to what the players wanted, but it was somewhere in the middle. MLB was able to get some things out of it. They got an expanded postseason. It's 12 games now, 12 teams now. Excuse me. So they added one team from each league to the postseason. A few of the things that people are going to notice on the field. The universal DH. Was put in there. That was kind of wanted by both sides, so that was kind of an easy thing to get in there. But a few, there will be a few potential rule changes that they'll talk about for next year. There's supposedly going to be a committee that has some players on it and has some other people appointed by ownership about what they want to do potentially for those rule changes. And there's some different things on the table, like potentially banning the shift or potentially pitch clocks, bigger bases, stuff like that are in the works that could be on that list. And they kind of laid the groundwork for how those could possibly be done if they end up going through. So definitely some interesting stuff there. But at the end of the day, those numbers don't matter quite as much as we've been kind of leading people on to believe. It's more of a this is how far apart thing that those numbers were a big deal on, more so than the fact that they were able to come to agreement is really what matters, and people really aren't going to notice that much. I'm sure that the player salaries will go up just a little bit. Some teams will be willing to spend a little bit more money because of the increased luxury tax threshold, but I don't think it's going to make that huge of a difference. I'm just excited we're going to get our baseball here this season for a full season. So.
Yeah, and one thing that we didn't mention as well was that there is a possibility of an international draft that would take away the qualifying offer system. That is not quite agreed to yet. They have set a deadline of middle July to basically come to an agreement on that and how it would be implemented. But we could see the official banning of a qualifying offer next off season at least. So that'll be something that we keep you guys apprised on throughout the season and where those talks are heading. But like you said, the you know it's it's really great that they got to this middle number because there was a lot of animosity from both sides that they wanted their number and they weren't budging, and that lasted for a long time. And I think basically it got to the time where both sides really figured out that 162 game season was on the line, and MLB from their side, they've just signed brand new deals with Apple and Peacock for new streaming services and all kinds of stuff that they really needed a full season, and the players always wanted a full season. So it came to the head that they had to make the decision on those last couple days to get it in there, and they got it. So baseball's back, and then basically what that did is it started the frenzy of free agency and the trades, which we'll kind of move our way into that. And there's going to be some grouping up here. We're going to start with all of the trades because there's really a group of two trades, and two trades that all are kind of interconnected with each other. So we'll go ahead and start with the Texas Rangers and the Minnesota Twins, and that started with the Twins trading catcher Mitch Garver to the Rangers for infielder Isaiah Kiner Falefa and a prospect Ronnie Henriquez. And then basically what that did is the Yankees and Twins ended up making a trade where the Twins flipped Isaiah Kiner Falefa and Josh Donaldson to the Yankees for catcher Gary Sanchez and shortstop Gio Urshela.
Yeah, so the first trade, between the Twins and the Rangers, the major league pieces, at least I don't know too much about the minor league piece in that trade, but the big ones were Mitch Garver and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. And Mitch Garver is a really solid power hitting catcher, who he's not a great defensive catcher, but he's a good hitter. And he puts up, when he plays, he's really good. This year, he played in 68 games, had 2 WAR in 68 games. Hit 13 home runs, 256 average, 358 on base, 517 slugging. He actually hit 31 home runs in only 93 games in 2019. So this is a guy who can really mash the baseball when he plays, but his problem's been staying on the field. Obviously, as a catcher, you're not expecting 162 games, but his career high in games played is 103 back in 2018. His career high in plate appearances was in 2019 with 359. So this is a guy who definitely you worry about being able to stay out there, stay on the field, and possibly the Rangers with their situation might even look to DH him a little bit, have him DH and have him catch some. But definitely a high upside power bat. And then it's kind of the opposite of what you get with him, of what you get with Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, a contact hitter that plays pretty good defense up the middle, which obviously his stay with the Twins was very short.
Yeah, because then the next day, I don't think he was in the building for 24 hours. And you go ahead and flip him to the Yankees with Josh Donaldson, which, that's big because the Yankees are going to take on the full salary of Donaldson's contract. I will have to look up. It is until at least through 2024.
Yep.
There's a mutual option there. But, Donaldson's been one of those guys who hasn't been able to stay healthy on the field for a long time. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Yankees are able to use him in that infield. Maybe they give him a little bit more DH time, and if he can stay healthy. But really, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is a guy that they have really targeted for even a couple years. There's been rumors back to, the off season before COVID that they were really trying to get him to be one of their infielders or a utility type guy for them. So it was a guy they coveted, and it was able to get that trade, picking up the salary from Donaldson. And it just kind of seemed like time that they were needed to get off Gary Sanchez. He just kind of needed the fresh start. Minnesota had just traded their catcher, so they needed another catcher slash, DH type guy, and then getting Gio Urshela, who immediately slots in as your shortstop now, which you were expecting kind of Flefa to be. It seems like a win-win trade for basically all three of these teams in it. The Rangers get a better hitting catcher for them now that gives them more of the try and compete type mode that they want to go to. The Yankees get the shortstop that they were really have coveted for a couple years and the power bat potential of Josh Donaldson, and then Minnesota gets a catcher that you're hoping you can revitalize back to his old form, and then a really solid shortstop type league average hitter, to play for you there.
Yeah, if he plays shortstop, he might play third.
Maybe.
I'm a little worried about him playing shortstop, but he's a great defensive third baseman, regardless, even if he doesn't play shortstop. But yeah, I mean, I agree that this is a really interesting trade because I feel like in some ways the Twins win this trade at the big league level because you worry about Donaldson staying out there, and you worry about Urshela staying out there too, because he hasn't exactly been the most durable player, but Donaldson's aging and he's in his mid to upper 30s and big contract, and he's still really good when he plays, but that's been an issue for him. I mean, he's had chronic injuries back for the only season in the last 5 years he played, all the way through was what is his 2018 season in Atlanta or 2019 season in Atlanta. That he stayed healthy for most of that year, but other than that, I mean, it's been rough for him staying healthy. And then um, you look at Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, I think is a stopgap for the Yankees, a great stopgap for the Yankees to have. They get a really good defensive shortstop who can come in there, big, decent contact hitter, hit somewhere down in the bottom of their order. But they really need some good up the middle defense. That's something they've been lacking the last couple of years. And as they've been playing Gleyber Torres at shortstop most of the time, and now they can for sure slide him over to second or third, and I guess second with Donaldson being there now, and they can have Connor Falefa play short, and because they have a couple of really really good prospects in the minor leagues that are going to be up in a couple of years that they can then have take over for Connor Falefa when he moves on. But I like this for the Twins too because I think Gary Sanchez is a guy who I think a lot of the New York media type stuff has worn on him some, and that he's a high upside player. If you can get him to commit to catching, and if this change of scenery can really, you know, give him the kick in the pants he needs, that could be a really, really big time, deal because he's got as high a upside as anybody at catcher in the big leagues. And then you look at Gio Urshela, like I said, a guy he's a really good defensive third baseman. He's shown flashes of being solid at the plate as well. So we'll see what he ends up doing, but I mean, he could be, I could very well see him put up similar numbers to what Donaldson puts up this year. So we'll see what ends up happening. But this is a really, really interesting move, and I feel like just with the money factor, I feel like the Twins probably won this deal because I honestly think the major league talent level it's kind of a wash. But I think that when you look at the money factor, I think the Twins obviously saved some money with this. So definitely interesting, and I'll be intrigued to see how these players play this year. See who won this trade.
Yeah, and actually, there's another Twins trade we'll talk about here in just a little bit, but that involves another team that made two trades that kind of are intertwined. So we'll talk a little bit more about the Twins and their ability to compete or what they're trying to go for here in just a little bit. But it does make sense. You get off that Donaldson contract, it frees a little bit more up for you to be more flexible this year. And I really do like Gary. Get him into a new scenery, new coaches, just everything new around him, and see where you can go because he has a ton of potential and talent, which we saw early in his career. But that media, New York media, like you said, can really wear on you. So, but let's go ahead and move on to the Mets and the A's. So this is basically going to be the A's portion of the two trades. Their first trade was trading Chris Bassett to the New York Mets and getting two prospects by the name of JT Ginn and Adam Ollier.
Yeah, so Chris Bassett's a guy who had a really, really good 2021 season. Put up a 157 innings, a 3.15 ERA, 3.34 FIP. His xFIP was a little bit higher than that, 3.93. This is a guy who, you kind of look at his pure talent level as a pitcher. It maybe isn't the highest out there, but he's had his success the last 2 years. He's been really good, and for Oakland. So I think he's a guy that the Mets would like to slot in as probably their number 3 pitcher behind DeGrom and Scherzer. He's solid for that role. He probably isn't a guy that you would want as your ace on a contending team, but for as a number 3, he's really good in that role. And he also kind of pushes that rotation back to where those last couple guys, the Walker and Carrasco's of the world, are more of like depth rather than having to be relied on constantly. As Walker has his inconsistencies and Carrasco's had his injury issues. So Chris Bassett, I definitely think that's a good guy to get. And for the Mets, it wasn't a lack of not giving anything up. JT Ginn's a really solid looking prospect, so he's had a good couple of years in the low minors. Former pretty high draft pick, a second round. I believe I think he was out of Mississippi State, maybe.
Yeah, he was.
I remember him in college. He was solid. So definitely a pretty good pickup there for the A's.
Yeah, I really like JT Ginn. Especially going to Oakland, who they've always found ways to maximize pitching as well. 22-year-old pitcher that has had two. He played an A ball and then high A this year. Like you said, both really good in both of those leagues. Gives him time to work up to being a major league talent, and I think he'll probably get there within probably 3 years or so. I think he can really be, a good rotation starter in the league. Adam Allier's a little bit of a guy. He's a little bit older. He's at 27 already, but he kind of projects as a long reliever slash number 5 starter. He, maybe a guy that you can see Oakland maybe move to the pin. Has a really good fastball and curveball and changeup. His slider's kind of lacking, lacks a little bit of command, so maybe going to the bullpen will help him a little bit more with that. But overall, I think it's a win-win trade again. Like the Mets get that number 3 starter that they need to pair right behind DeGrom and Scherzer. He's on a 1-year deal. But then the A's, you're trading a 33-year-old on a 1-year deal, and you're getting back, 2 prospects that could reach your rotation, and one guy who I really like a lot. And even if the other one turns out to be more of a bullpen arm, you really didn't give up much. You weren't going to re-sign Bassett, and you're not going to compete because we'll talk about the next trade, which is a pretty big one for Oakland. So, win-win trade from both sides, and it'll be interesting to see what the prospects will be like in here in a couple of years. But looking forward to the next trade, and Matt's going to have some stronger feelings about this one. But the Braves and A's agreed to a trade that sends Atlanta Matt Olson, first All-Star first baseman Matt Olson, who also agrees to an 8-year, $168 million extension, while the Oakland A's get pitchers Ryan Cusick, Joey Estes, catcher Shea Langeliers, and outfield prospect or major league player Christian Pache.
Yeah, so this is the big one. This is probably the biggest trade you're going to see in this, in the off season this year. Matt Olson is a really, really, really underrated first baseman. He's really good. A lot of people don't talk about him mainly because he's played in Oakland, but this year he put up 5 WAR, 39 home runs. He's a 2-time Gold Glover at first base. His career, he's already put up 15 WAR and really just he's only played 3 full seasons because his first 2 years were bouncing up and down between the majors and minor leagues. And then he had 2020. So he's a guy who he's just a great all around first baseman. And the return for him, he's just the only player the Braves got in this deal. And the extension they signed him to was very, very team friendly, in my opinion. If he continues at the pace he's on now, as they're going to be paying him basically, right at $20 million as a maximum for the next 8 years, and have an all-star first baseman. The return for him was, Christian Pache. He really doesn't. He really, really doesn't have it at the plate right now, and he had showed some flashes of maybe being able to pick it up at the plate as a prospect. But that's always kind of been the concern, and he was probably the worst hitter that we saw in baseball last year when he came up for his time in the big leagues. He really did. He was really, really, really bad at the plate. His defense is elite in center field, and there's hope that he's so athletic. There's hope that he could fix his swing and figure it back out, but there are a lot of issues with his swing that need to be addressed. You look at the other guys in the return, Shea Langeliers. This is probably the biggest loss for the Braves. He's a guy who is a high upside catcher. He hits for power. He's great defensively. He's not a great he doesn't hit for a high average. He hits for a really pretty low average. It's not he strikes out a decent amount, but a lot of it's a batting average on balls in play. He hits the ball in the air a lot, pops it up a lot. But he's a guy who has a high upside. It's kind of weird that Oakland wanted him in the deal because they do have Sean Murphy behind the plate, but I guess that might be somebody they end up trading in a year or two, anyways. So the way Oakland operates, so I mean, I guess it's good to kind of get whatever you can. But I think Shea Langoliers has a good chance to be a solid big leaguer. Ryan Cusick could end up being the guy that hurts the worst for Atlanta and pays off the best for Oakland in this. In this, he's a super hard thrower. That was the first round pick for the Braves this year, but he's got a lot of question marks, and a lot of people are thinking he ends up being a reliever. So he's kind of one of those high risk, high reward types. Then Joey Estes is a decent prospect that is not quite as high rated as the other guys in this trade, but he's a guy who could certainly end up being a big leaguer in a rotation. And then you kind of look at the last little facet of this is that this means that the Braves are moving on from Freddie Freeman, which is you know not super surprising after the way the last couple months have unfolded. But if you had asked somebody at the end of the season if that was going to happen, they would have been shocked. But honestly, from a fan standpoint, I hate losing Freddie Freeman, and he's a great player. He's meant a lot, as a Braves fan. He's been there the whole time, and he's meant an absolute ton to everybody who supports the Braves and has watched the Braves. He won the Braves or helped win the Braves a World Series, and he's going to be forever beloved by Atlanta. From a baseball standpoint, I probably am on the side of rather having, this amount of Matt Olson at the price he's in. He is rather than, the potential 6 years at 30 million per that Freddie Freeman's going to cost at his age. So from a baseball standpoint, I really like it for the Braves. From a fan standpoint, it hurts to not have him back, but at the end of the day, it's just one of those things. Like that's the way professional sports work. Freddie Freeman wants to get his paycheck, and the Braves weren't willing to pay a 32-year-old first baseman as much money as someone else is. So that market's kind of getting crazy right now too. But we'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, so this is a pretty cool deal for the Braves, and the Oakland got a really good high upside return too. So this is gonna be an interesting one.
Yeah, it's another trade that I kind of like for both sides. Langoliers is a guy who I think will be really good, and if they are hitting that reset button, it does make sense even now or in a year or so to trade Murphy and just try and get as much as you can for a 27, 28-year-old catcher. When you're going to have him, if you can figure out with Pache and figure out what he needs to do at the plate to be more consistent there, you're getting, an elite level center fielder that can get on base for you, but because he's fast enough, he can get on base if just with little infield hits and stuff. And then, if you can figure out with Cusick, even if he becomes one of the like a dominant closer, like they've saw guys like Liam Hendricks before, be starters that kind of failed and then be able to be elite level closers. So, and then with the Braves, you're getting Matt Olson for 8 years, 168 overall. That's probably the amount of money Freddie Freeman's looking for or will get, maybe a little bit less, or Freeman might get a little bit less than this, but you're getting him for 8 years when you were talking about 5 or 6 for Freeman, and Olson's 28 years old. And I really think he's going to thrive in Atlanta, getting out of Oakland, which is one of the worst ballparks to hit in. You get to a field like Truist Park that really helps left-handed hitters go into the chop house. There will be be really good. And I saw something today. It's like the Braves are paying Matt Olson, Ronald Acuna Jr. and Ozzy Albies like $303 million over 23 years or something combined, where Fernando Tatis is getting 14 years for like 330 million or something. It's just insane the way that the Braves are able to, get these guys to take really team friendly deals and help them out in the long run.
Yeah, that's not the only heist they pulled off today too. So
Yeah, which we'll talk about that one here in a little bit. But Then looking, we'll jump over to the next kind of group of trades here, and that's with the Twins and Reds kicking off. The Reds portion of it, where the Minnesota Twins get Sonny Gray and prospect Francis Peguero, while the Reds get the Minnesota first round pick from this year, Chase Petty.
Yeah, so starting off with Sonny Gray. Sonny Gray is a really solid pitcher. He honestly he had a little bit of a down year when you look at his ERA and his FIP, but his other metrics were really good this year. And maybe a little bit of bad luck on home run balls. He was playing in Great American Ballpark, which is a notorious hitters park. So maybe going to Minnesota will help that. He has great strikeout numbers. He's been over 10 strikeouts per nine the last 3 years, which is really good. And he's been a legitimate probably number two pitcher for the last for a long time now. Even his time coming up with Oakland to his time with Cincinnati. When he was with the Yankees, he struggled a little bit, but yeah, I mean he's a great pitcher to have. And you look at the Twins, and it's kind of weird that the Twins are gonna try or we're going to acquire him, um, because he's it does feel a little bit weird because of this twin situation. They just got done trading guys this year, like like Jose Barrios, and you know it doesn't make a ton of sense to go trade for another pitcher that's doesn't have too much of control left. But if you are going to go for it this year, this is a good guy to do it with. And they gave up their a high first round draft pick from last year, a high school pitcher that's now you just never know. So um, you just never know how that's going to work out. But definitely an interesting move. And obviously the Reds are using this to pick up a young pitcher and to shed a little bit of money too. They've been trying to do that all off season. So uh, we'll see what ends up happening. And if the Twins can add more, I think this could end up being a really nice move. They can add more pieces. But as of right now, it's kind of weird that they would be trading for pitchers when they really don't. I mean, he's legitimately their only good pitcher to start the year with Maeda hurt. So
Yeah, and that's why I think that it's not that much, because you're also getting a prospect back in Francis Peguero. You're picking up the little bit of the contract from Sonny Gray, but you just got off the Josh Donaldson contract, and Petty is a lottery ticket. He's a guy who can be really good, but he's struggled with command big time already, and you just don't know. He's a high school pitcher, so it's gonna take him a long time to get that return on the investment, even if the Reds do turn him around. But going into the lockout, Dylan Bundy was their best pitcher, was like their
yeah.
ace pitcher, and that's not very good. So it makes sense that they were able to get Sonny Gray. They moved off the Donaldson contract, so maybe they're able to open up and trade for some other guys. I know that there's been talks that they've been talking to the A's about a potential like Mania and Montas package, which would be really interesting to see what that would take. Get them back, and what. Um, what that would mean for the Twins rotation if they were to have Montas, Mania, and Sonny Gray, and where else they'd be able to go from there. But it is a little interesting because they were just getting off of trading Jose Barrios. There was talks about trading Byron Buxton, so they got his extension done. And then getting Gary Sanchez and Gio Urshela in there, but flipping Garver, and it's kind of a weird offseason, but the Twins had to do something. Like it was their roster had been kind of stagnant for the last couple of years. They hadn't been really successful, and they just needed to get some fresh faces in there. And so I don't really hate the Sonny Gray trade at all. He'll be a good piece for them, and maybe even a guy, if it doesn't work out this year, there's a mutual option. Maybe they can pick that up and potentially trade him down the line or something. But you didn't give up much to get Sonny Gray, so it's a pretty solid deal in my eyes.
Yeah.
But looking at the next one, which also involves the Reds, it's with the Mariners and the Reds. Seattle acquires Eugenio Suarez and Jesse Winker. Then Cincinnati gets Justin Dunn, Jake Fraley, right or left-handed prospect Brandon Williamson, and a player to be named later who we don't know who that is, but there's a lot of rumblings out there that Cincinnati is very high on whoever they are getting from that.
Yeah, so you look at the trade for the Mariners and what this means for them. Jesse Winker's a really good player, especially he just absolutely mashes gets right-handed pitching. I mean, that's what he is. He is a right-handed pitching destroyer. He put up a 148 WRC plus this year, which is bonkers. 305 average, hit 24 home runs. That's only in 110 games, 485 plate appearances. The 110 games, he did battle injury a little bit late in the season, but he also is kind of a platoon player. Not a full-fledged platoon player, but he definitely is a guy with some pretty big splits.
Yeah, yeah. This year alone, he hit 346 versus righties and
Yeah,
176 against lefties.
Yeah, so he's definitely a guy that you're not going to rely on to hit against lefties, but a team that just lost their biggest left-handed power bat in Kyle Seager to retirement. This is something that they probably need is just somebody who can hit right-handed pitching really well. A lot of their top hitters are right-handed, so that's a good thing for them to get. Maybe he's like a type that you could platoon with like a Mitch Haniger or something. Like that would be interesting. Eugenio Suarez. A lot of this was kind of a cost move, where you're trying to dump the contract you got Eugenio Suarez on. You know, even though it's not a huge contract, it's still $10 million. And the last year or two, he's been pretty useless. But you never know; he might figure it back out. He's honestly his batting average on balls in play has been extremely low the last 2 years, like compared to his career norms. So I could definitely see him having somewhat of a bounce back. A lot of the projection systems are thinking he'll have a bounce back of some sorts. He still hit 31 home runs this year, but a 224 batting average on balls in play really limited him. Whereas his career average is actually at 299 on that metric. So he's a pretty good bounce back candidate. But and if you can get him to bounce back to that level, I mean, he's only owed like $9 million this year, so it's that could be a really really good move for them. So that contract is not near as bad as people kind of think it is. But you look at going forward, if you're the Mariners, you've got a new third baseman that could potentially slot in there, replacing Kyle Seager, and you replace the missing left-handed power bat that Kyle Seager leaves that gap. So you definitely got a couple nice got some nice nice stuff there if you're Seattle.
Yeah, and then looking at the Reds' perspective, there's a lot of people that didn't really like this move from their side, and I'm not one of them. I really like the return they got. Justin Dunn is a guy who I really liked the past year. Had a really good year. 3.75 ERA, but only in 50 innings. He battled some injuries. I think it was more of a shoulder injury, but he was really good the first half of the season until that. Brandon Williamson he's a lottery ticket type guy that he really reminds me of Blake Snell. Kind of has the pitches just like him, but struggles with command. But if you can harness that, I mean, we saw Blake Snell win his AL Cy Young before. So he can get to that level. You just got to work and refine him a little bit. Depending on who that player to be named later prospect is, it could be even a better trade. Jake Fraley just seems like a throw-in guy here. Like he's a 26-year-old outfielder. You're losing Winker. Here's a guy you can throw out there for now, or you can. I don't know if he has any. He has 2 minor league options left, so you can even put him down in the minors, and he can just be a depth piece for if somebody gets injured. But the way the Reds are going, it's probably going to be a starting center fielder.
Yeah.
Or starting outfielder for him.
Take the flyer on him, and if he works out, then you got a guy that maybe you can use in the future, and if not, then you're not really too worried about it.
Too
Like,
much.
yeah.
So, you got 2 really good pitchers. One, Justin Dunn can come in and immediately be in your rotation right now. Williamson is a guy who you could probably bring up this year, but most likely will be like 2023. Just give him another year to kind of fully harness that command and work on it down in the minors. And then Fraley is a guy who you can just throw out there or be a depth piece for it. And Suarez, the Reds are going into the full-fledged kind of rebuild mode. His contract wasn't bad, but he's 30 years old. He's not going to be there at the end of that deal. He's regressed the past couple years. So trade him when he has a little bit of value left for that contract. And then Winker, it hurts giving him up. He's 28. He's been an impact bat for you the past couple years, but you got a really good package back for him, and you got a couple guys who can be, middle of the rotation. And if Williamson can harness, his best of his abilities, can maybe even be a top of the rotation player for you. And you get off the contracts and just go more towards your rebuild. So I actually like that I don't think any of these trades has really been a trade where I'm like, man, I don't like that for either side. I think it's a pretty solid, so far rundown of these trades for any team that has been involved so far. But we'll go ahead and move on to more of the free agent signings, and that kicked off with the San Francisco Giants signing left-handed pitcher Carlos Rodon to a 2-year, $44 million deal.
Yeah, Carlos Rodon last year was special when he was pitching. He had the best. He had probably had the best stuff at the big leagues. He looked a lot like prime Chris Sale when he was pitching. I mean, he was that good. 237 ERA, 265 fielding independent pitching. He put up 5 wins above replacement. He only threw 132 innings. That's the problem. He battled injury down the stretch, and that's been the downfall for him. In 2019, he only threw 34 innings. 2020, he only threw 7 innings. Last year, 132 innings, a lot more, but he still battled injury down the stretch, and he was healthy coming into last year. So this is a guy that if you can bank on him putting up a pretty healthy season, that's similar to what he put up last year. I mean, my God, he was so good last year. He was insanely good. So, you hope that he can put up that kind of season and stay healthy, and you might be looking at like a Cy Young type player. But it's also possible that he gets injured again. So I think it really makes a lot of sense for the Giants because it's you give him that high value. He gets paid a lot this year and next year as a guy who is really 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 talented. But so you get the opportunity to see what he does. He could help you, but at the same time, you don't have a long term commitment to a guy who tomorrow could end up tearing up his shoulder again and not pitching again. So it's not like that long term commitment, but it is a commitment that you can make to have him come in there and put up like a Cy Young type season if he's healthy. So I really like this move for the Giants.
Yeah, I don't like the move as being a NL West competitor of the Giants, but for the Giants itself, it's a really great deal. It fills right into the role for Kevin Gossman that left to Toronto, and the Giants are one of those teams that they really find a way to maximize what each player can do. They're really big on the numbers, and they are also a team that is not afraid to lay off of you if you need the rest. Like they did it this past year with Buster Posey. They went in and said, "Hey, you're playing 2 days in a row, but no matter what, that third day you're on the bench." So they can go to a guy like Rodon and be like, "Hey, to give you less wear on you, like you're only going to go 6 innings or 7 innings. Like you're not going to be pushed past your limit, or you're only going to get to 100 pitches, or they'll find some way to try and help keep him healthy for the entire season. They're always a team that is on the front edge of being able to do that and get the most out of those players. Because they set those clear standards ahead of time. So it is going to be interesting to see what they are able to do with Rodon, and maybe they're even able to unlock a little something in his mechanics or something that'll help him stay healthy and take another notch up. He was really good this past year, like you said, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to maintain that or even take another little step forward consistently with the Giants, because they just find a way to be able to do that. But
Absolutely.
the next deal we had was Clayton Kershaw re-signs in LA with the Dodgers on a 1-year, $17 million deal.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of something that was pretty expected. I think some people might have thought he could go elsewhere, but I mean, you weren't. I'm not surprised at all. He ended up back in LA. He's been there his whole career. It's a place that's definitely willing to pay money for somebody like him. And obviously as a pitcher, he still adds great production when he's healthy, and if he stays healthy all year, then he's super productive, and he's the Hall of Famer that he's going to be. And if he doesn't stay healthy, then it's a 1-year commitment. So um, I don't think there's too much that needs to be said about Kershaw returning to LA. He's part of what the Dodgers have been for the last 10 or 12 years, and he's going to continue to do that in 2022.
Yeah, there was concern that he might have went to Texas, and he even acknowledged it and said like it was a thought, but LA is where he knows, and he's been there his entire professional career, and that they gave him the best chance to win right now. and a 1 year, $17 million deal. You just knew that they were going to be able to figure something out. Like there's always going to be a spot for Clayton Kershaw when he wants to be there. There is some incentives in there. It hasn't quite come out what those are that could push it up a little bit more. But he is healthy. He battled the elbow injury late in the year last year. Didn't even pitch in the playoffs, so there was a concern there. But he is back fully healthy, and he'll be able to be there. It's just how long can he stay healthy? Will he be able to last the entire season? But there really wasn't much of a concern about where he was going to play. But the next move that we had was Yusei Kikuchi signs with the Toronto Blue Jays on a 3-year, $36 million deal.
Yeah, so I really don't like this deal very much. You say Kikuchi is he just hasn't been a great pitcher since he got to the big leagues. 2019, 2020, over 5 ERA. 2020, he actually his metrics were pretty good, but 2019 his metrics were awful. This year, he actually was an all-star, but it was really kind of a flash in the pan. As down the stretch, he struggled. His ERA came all the way back up to a 4.41. His expected ERA number was a 5.23 this year, a 4.61 FIP. He's just not. He's really more of like a number 4 pitcher, and to commit $12 million a year to him seems a bit much for for a team that like the Blue Jays that that's wanting to spend. One thing that is good for him there is that for one thing his teammate Hyunjin Ryu, um, another guy from Asia, that that there could be some that could be some good connection. A lot of the I know they're different nationalities, but a lot of the Asian players like to stick together in certain ways. And then the fact that he's not going to be relied on as a number 1 like he was in Seattle. You've got other guys. You got Gossman. You got Ryu. You got
Barrios.
Barrios. I mean,
Yeah.
he's really going to be their number 4, number 5. So you don't worry too much about him as a number 4, number 5. He's got a little bit more upside than probably your typical. Like we're just going to throw him out there to eat innings while our other 3 or 4 guys are top guys. And I mean, you got a couple other young guys too, like Manoa, and you maybe could even if Nate Pearson comes back healthy, he could eventually even shift Kikuchi like into a swing role or something maybe. So I don't love paying him 12 million a year for 3 years, but I mean, it's not a horrible signing by any means.
Yeah, it might be a little much. I was thinking maybe he'd get 8 to 10 million a year. But maybe they see something in Kikuchi that they can help unlock, like they did with Robbie Ray. Not the pure stuff, but maybe there's something that they understand or know that underlying numbers or something that can help him out.
Yeah,
But
yeah, they were.
it,
Well,
oh,
I'll say they were fairly successful with Steven Matz, who's kind of a similar type.
yeah, yeah,
So
I mean that is a good point as well. And I think it's gonna help that he's not a guy that they have to have be atop the rotation and get a lot of innings. Like they also have other guys that can take, like Ross Stripling. They have him as well. He can be a starter or that multi-inning reliever. They have Alex Manoa. They have Nate Pearson if he's able to stay healthy and get back to his prospect form. Like they don't need Kikuchi to be all that amazing. They just need him to be a solid innings eater and go out there and keep them in ball games. And with that offense, they'll be able to to stay in games pretty easily. So it's not an awful deal. It's a little bit more than I thought he was going to get, but sometimes that's kind of what happens when Rodon and Kershaw kind of come off the board really early, and then you're kind of like the top free agent pitcher out there, and you have a lot of teams who didn't get those other guys, and they're trying to push to get somebody. So hopefully it works out for him, but it's one of those things to be seen, because I think moving from the AL West to the AL East is not going to be very kind to Kikuchi probably. But we'll look out to the next signing we had was Nelson Cruz signed a 1-year, $15 million deal with an option for 2023 with the Washington Nationals.
yeah, I think this might be the weirdest signing of the whole postseason. Um, Nelson Cruz is obviously a year or 2 from retirement. He definitely struggled a little bit down the stretch last year, although some of that could have been bad luck. But he's obviously still a great player last year. But as somebody who's a DH only guy, it makes sense. His market went up a lot in the National League. And the Nationals were able to take a chance on him. But it really doesn't make a lot of sense for a guy that's at his age and everything to go to a non-contender. And I truly don't believe Washington's in any position to contend, especially with the three teams at the top of that division. Washington just has no pitching, and I know they have Juan Soto, but he can only do so much as a player. He's great. He could be the best player in the entire game, and we've been watching the best player in the game get left out of the playoffs for the last like 10 years, anyways. So, um, you know, I don't especially understand him going there unless it was just the best offer he got, which it might have been. But and he might have just wanted the money from them, which is fine. But definitely interesting. I guess for the Nationals, you get a right-handed hitter to hit behind Soto. He can protect Soto, maybe make force teams throw pitches in the zone to Soto a little bit more, so he can kind of capitalize because he has a lot more power, I think, than people realize. Just because he walks so much, nobody wants to pitch to him. He doesn't ever have any threats behind him in the lineup, so he ends up just walking every time because he's real patient. He has that good eye, but he might be able to hit a little bit more of be able to attack the strike zone a little bit more, which is could make his power numbers really spike. But we'll see what happens. Definitely interesting. I think you need a lot to go right for them to be anywhere close to contention, though. So, really no risk. I think that's a mutual option, so the team can decline it if Cruz really shows some age fall off this year, which is possible at what is he 43,
41.
42, 41? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
anytime you're over 40, obviously, you could fall off a cliff any day. So, but chances are Nelson Cruz hits really well for a bad team and gets traded at the deadline. So,
Yeah, and that's kind of what I think. I mean, it was kind of weird when you heard that the teams were in on him, like the Dodgers, the Padres, the Brewers, teams that have a legitimate chance to be competitive, and then kind of out of nowhere, he ends up signing with the Nationals. And he says that they told him they're going to be aggressive and get other moves in here, but it's you can say that all you want, but once until it comes to fruition, and like you said, I don't think they're anywhere near competing. The moves they'd have to make are just not out there to be made, really. um so I kind of see it as somebody who they can trade him at the deadline, like you said, or if that option gets picked up, then they trade him in the off season or keep him until that deadline and try and flip him. Like I would be highly surprised if Nelson Cruz finishes both years with the Nationals, or if he signs this year, they keep him and then maybe he retires in the offseason or something. But it was kind of weird because he kind of didn't go to a team that he had a real chance to win. He had he just went for where he's the most money, and you can't fault a guy for that, but it kind of it's head scratching for sure.
yeah.
But the next signing we had was Martin Perez signed a 1 year, $4 million deal with the Texas Rangers, and basically returning where he started his career.
Yeah. Martin Perez is a guy that, he's been in Boston the last couple of years. He's just a back end of the rotation type arm. He's not very good anymore. He never was really a top of the rotation type guy, but he'll eat some innings for them. He's not a disaster like Mike Voltanevich was last year, or Colby Allard is, or something. So, I mean, this one really doesn't mean that much. Just a innings eating signing. So
Yeah, it really is, and kind of just more depth into that rotation, pretty much. But the next signing we had is Andrew McCutchen joins the Milwaukee Brewers on a 1 year deal, although we do not know the value of that yet.
yeah, and some of this one depends on the value, but Andrew McCutchen can still get on base, walks a lot. He's not he's not a disaster. He really needs to DH. He was horrible in the field this year. But he hit it at an above average clip, a 107 WRC plus. He's also a little bit unlucky on balls in play. Only had a 242 BABIP. So hit 27 home runs. He could do well in Milwaukee, and especially if he's able to DH there. Um, he gives them a legitimate threat in their lineup that needs some more threats in it. So, not a bad signing. I guess it kind of depends on the dollar value, but obviously it's a 1 year deal. You're not too worried about that. depending on how it handcuffs them for this year. So if it handcuffs them from signing someone else this year, then maybe it's not a great deal. But I kind of doubt that they would do it if that was the case. So definitely a guy who has a little bit of upside as a hitter. Could have some kind of bounce back year. Although I don't really expect him to be some kind of superstar ever again.
Yeah, but if you can get him back to like the 2019 production that you got for him, being a 250 hitter with good on base and hit you, in that ballpark, you'll probably be able to hit 10 to 15 home runs. Like that's kind of all you need from
He
Andrew
hit
McCutchen.
27 last year, so I mean he'll hit more than 10 to 15 if he plays every day. But
Well, I was
um,
looking back at 19, like
he only played
he only
59
played 59
games.
games that
Yeah,
year. So
yeah,
he hit for more, but if you can get him back to the
yeah,
250 average and a 370 on base, like you'll
yeah.
take it from Andrew McCutchen. So,
Oh, absolutely.
and then like everyday player signing, well, at least everyday player at this moment, but Andrelton Simmons signed with the Chicago Cubs on a 1 year, $4 million deal.
Yeah, this is a deal that just kind of gives him some experience up the middle. A guy who's a great defensive player. He had a bad year last year for Minnesota. He's actually worth negative wins above replacement, minus -0.5, but he's still a great defensive shortstop. Um, he's just not what he once was. That defense really, he's still good, but with his bat, you have to play like elite level defense, and he's not quite that guy anymore. But maybe he has had some wild fluctuations on his at the plate in his career. So maybe he has a better year at the plate this year, and they can play him every day. But they're not going to really rely upon him because to play every day because they have Nico Horner and Nick Madrigal up the middle. So I think you're just kind of looking at a guy who's gonna just split time up the middle, and maybe not in a platoon role, but just kind of a, you got three guys to play two positions every day, and Nico Horner and Nick Madrigal have some versatility and where they can play on the infield too. So, he had some pieces. I think a lot of Cubs fans and Yankees fans with that Kiner Falefa deal were a little disappointed, thinking that they were going to be in on Correa. But this probably I don't think that I think this probably signals the Cubs aren't very confident in that. I don't know if it means they're going to quit trying. Obviously, if you can get land Correa over, you wouldn't care about this signing anymore. But it probably kind of signifies that they're not super confident in that. So
Yeah, I don't see it much of a thing. I think they're gonna roll with Nico Horner and Nick Madrigal, and I think Simmons is more of just the kind of bench kind of guy that neither of them have been able to stay healthy. Madrigal is he had the one big injury last year, but Horner's been a guy who has really struggled to stay healthy throughout his career so far.
yeah,
So Simmons can just be a guy that if one of those goes down, he can fill in and he can get spot starts, wherever. But will really help the infield defense because they have guys like Kyle Hendricks, Mark Stroman, and Wade Miley, who all rely on the ground ball very heavily.
yes,
Um,
absolutely.
so that will help them out. But the next bit of moves, they're all kind of bullpen related moves, so we'll kind of fly through them a little quicker than we have been. But Jerry's Familia and Brad Hand both signed 1 year, $6 million contracts with the Philadelphia Phillies.
Yeah, these guys are both former real high end relievers who have really struggled the last couple years. I think the Phillies are kind of betting on law of averages. One of the two kind of finds themselves a little bit again. Relievers are really volatile. Both of them were pretty bad last year, but that maybe one of the two kind of finds their form again for a season. It's not a super high price to pay, and you're getting guys who have at times been good before, so it's not horrible deals. Even though I think the Phillies would like to have added somebody a little bit more, with a little bit more certainty in that bullpen, as bad as that bullpen's been.
Yeah, they need a lot of help down there, and I think they're just kind of hoping on these guys being a bounce back candidate or something for him. But
Yeah,
their typical Phillies move: bad relievers, let's sign them and hope that we can turn them around. They never do.
yeah.
So the next one was Joe Kelly signs with the White Sox on a 2 year, $17 million deal.
Yeah, I mean, and Joe Kelly's a guy he's perfect for a middle reliever. He can be somewhat inconsistent, especially with his command, but when he stays healthy, he's got really good stuff, and he can go in stretches being great. He's just another guy in that bullpen that's going to be really solid. I mean, that bullpen is insane. So
Yeah, and it's gonna, ever since lockout ended, you haven't heard anything about them trading Craig Kimball, which is
Yeah.
really interesting. Which was a foregone conclusion before it. But if they keep Kopech down there, you have Bummer down there, you have Crochet down there, like Kelly, Kimbrell, Hendricks, like that bullpen is disgusting, and especially with the velocity, like they're just going to keep throwing consistent velocity at you all the time, from both sides. That could be a real nasty signing for the White Sox, for sure. But the next one we'll jump to, the Chicago Cubs signed Chris Martin on a 1-year deal, which I don't think I've seen the value at least on that yet.
Yeah, Chris Martin's a guy I'm real familiar with. He's been with the Braves. He's a guy who the sticky stuff ban really hurt. He really struggled after that. And he's a little bit of an older guy. The one thing I will say about him is that he's really 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 tall, and sometimes your mechanics get really out of whack randomly when you're in that way, and it's possible that that could also have been a part of his thing last year that really helped made him struggle. But at times he's been a really good reliever, so not a bad signing. What did you say the number was on it?
I haven't seen his
On
value
it, I think it
reported
was
yet.
really low. I think it was only like $3 or $4 million. So if it's that the case, then that's totally fine reliever to sign, just kind of as a middle reliever, who has a little bit of upside.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one was Adam Ottavino signs with the New York Mets on a 1-year, $4 million deal.
Yeah, and Adam Ottavino is a guy who is been in New York as a Yankee, and now he's a Met. He's a guy that he has a great slider. He wasn't all that good last year, I don't think. I think it was the year he really struggled, but he's one of those guys that when he finds his slider, he's as good as anybody. But that's one of those pitches that can be kind of inconsistent. So you just never know if that slider is going to be there or not. And he could end up being he's just a high upside, high risk, high reward type guy in the bullpen right now. So definitely somebody that you could potentially you don't want him being your closer that you're relying on at the start of the year, but they have Edwin Diaz for that. So he's a guy that he could just add another really quality reliever if he has a good year. So.
Absolutely. And the last one we'll go on is that the other heist that you said the Braves got today, and that was signing Colin McHugh on a 2-year, $10 million deal with a third-year option that's worth $6 million.
Yeah, I absolutely love this deal for the Braves. Colin McHugh last year in Tampa was one of the best relievers in baseball. Put up, a 155 ERA in 64 innings. He actually started 7 games. I think most of those were out of that opener role, but he's a guy who's got a nasty relief stuff, high spin rate, doesn't throw very hard, but he just throws in breaking balls. He throws frisbees up there, and a 212 FIP last year. Got the ball on the ground a lot more than he had in the past, and he did all this in one of the toughest divisions in baseball. And it's not like it's a flash in the pan. 2018 with the Astros, he had a 199 ERA on the season. So this is a guy who has a track record and had a great year. And the Braves got him on a really cheap contract, have him under control for 3 years. I thought this was a fantastic deal.
Yeah, it's a really good deal, and I couldn't believe that he only signed, for $5 million a year with an option for 6. Like, he's a guy you probably expected to get, close to $8 million a year with the production he was giving, on a 2 to 3 year deal. So it's a real steal for the Braves. They just seem to always find those. So it would be a really good addition to that bullpen. But just wrapping up on everything that we've seen, since lockout ended, and then getting ready to have spring training games start here in a couple days. Opening day is going to be 3 weeks from Thursday. Just kind of what are your thoughts so far on everything, and what are you looking forward to kind of getting into spring training games and getting ready for the regular season?
Yeah, I mean the big free agents, the two major ones haven't fallen yet, and then some of the other big-ish ones haven't fallen yet. Obviously, Correa is still out there. I'm kind of expecting him to go back to Houston now. I feel like a couple of the teams that were in on him haven't really been able to pull it together. And Houston seems like they've gotten really aggressive trying to bring him back. I look at maybe I look at Freddie Freeman, and that market's just gotten really weird. And I feel like it's going to be a surprise team. I think he probably would have signed with Los Angeles by now, or the Yankees by now if he was going to. I think it might be somebody that hadn't been talked about a lot. I kind of like the Blue Jays there, honestly, even though it's kind of weird with Vlad Jr. Maybe Vlad Jr. DHs or something, but or vice versa. But I think that could also be just some really random team. And yeah, I mean, I'm excited for the season to start too. I mean, it's getting close. I can't wait to see some spring training baseball. See how some of these players come out and look. It's also exciting sometimes spring training to go ahead and see some of your prospects come up and play a little bit. See what they've got at the big league level or against big league level competition. In a small sample, get them exposed to that, and then we're only 3 weeks from the season actually beginning, so it's going to be a short spring training because of the lockout, but hopefully I'm hoping that they're able to even get everyone ramped up, well enough to be ready. So we'll see. I'm excited. It's been a great couple. It's been a whirlwind couple of days,
Yeah, it has
and
been.
it's just going to continue going like that for the next 2 or 3 days until the really big pieces fall. Freeman, Correa, Trevor Story still out there, Conforto still out there. There's still a lot out there. So we'll
Schwarber,
have
Bryant.
Schwarber, Bryant. I mean, we'll have the next the next 3 or 4 days. I'm sure we'll have another flurry of moves, and then we'll have a few smaller pieces that are still left unsigned that teams snatch up. I think most pitchers have already kind of signed. There's a few out there still, like maybe a Zach Greinke or somebody, but that are interesting at least. But it's mostly the big ticket position players that are still out there. So we'll see what happens. It's gonna be very entertaining, and I can't wait for the season to start. It's gonna be a fun season. So
Yeah, neither can I. And most of those pitchers are going to come from the trade market. There's still Mania, there's still Montas, there's still the hope of maybe a Luis
Castillo,
Castillo
yeah,
trade. And I think there's another pitcher or two that I think are flying under the radar that will probably get traded somewhere. Um, just it's going to be that whirlwind. I think everyone's kind of waiting for Freeman and Correa. I think we already expected Freeman to sign. Like we expected him to be one of the first free agents to sign. I think we knew Correa would take a little bit more time
yeah.
because he's a Boris client, but we thought that he would sign. But I feel like Freeman and Correa are more likely. Freeman are kind of holding up that market because teams that don't get Freeman will kind of jump to the Correa or not Correa, but to the Schwarber, the
Schwarber,
Bryant, the other guys that
Rizzo, yeah.
Rizzo, the other guys that can play first base potentially. And then with Story, you're kind of waiting for Correa to sign to where you're going to go, and it's all kind of just getting all held up on that. I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple big pitcher trades happen before the weekend's over. And then those guys, they should be in line before Monday comes. Like you would think that they would be there because with spring training games started, most people want about 3 weeks to ramp up, and we're just about at that time. So I would really expect to see the once one of them falls, that the rest would kind of just start going pretty quickly, and get in line. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. I'm excited to watch games again. Even spring training games, which don't mean much, like they're more important now because of everything that we happened. And the real threat of not having baseball. Like I'm very interested in sitting down and watching the Dodgers, even though it's in Arizona and a day game, just play some baseball that's live and it's new and it's not old reruns from 2021 season or whatever. So, I'm happy it's back. It's been a whirlwind, but it gives us a lot of content to talk about, which is never a bad thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we'll keep you updated here, but I think that'll do it for us this week.
Yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.